And blue, too. All colors.
Do they float?
Oh, yes. They float, Georgie. They float.
Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by Jasmine Delgado and Carlos Berber of the upcoming Alibi and so much more. How you doing tonight, guys?
Fabulous.
We're doing great.
It's amazing to have you guys on here. Before we get started, the Indiegogo for Alibi is going to be up on Friday. So if you're watching this video right now, make sure you come back here Friday or you follow these fine people on social media. All their links are down here in the description. I will also have the Indiegogo link down here as well. So that way you guys can go and contribute to Alibi. So before that, guys, what can you tell us about Alibi? Obviously, spoiler free, that people would be interested in hearing.
Basically, it's about a dominatrix who has a bad day. So it has some horror elements. It has some dark comedy elements and some like romantic undertones as well. I wanted to create something that I haven't seen personally myself, and a genre I haven't really seen much of either. And wrote the story based off of that and some life experiences.
That's awesome. And that's something, like you said, you don't see every day. How often do you hear that story? And we all know people that have been either into Dom or we know dominatrix ourselves. So it's something that everybody can relate to. So I'm very, very excited about this. When we were talking about it, it's something I got very excited about. What can you tell us a little bit about, Jasmine, that you're excited about?
Honestly, I'm most excited that it's going to portray the true side of that world. Because usually, at least for me, the little bits of, S&M or dominatrix lifestyle that I've seen in film, it's very cheesy. It's, oh, you've been a bad boy. Like, okay, well, that's fun and all, but when you watch this movie, you're really going to be introduced into that world in a very beautiful, artistic manner. I don't know if you've ever seen American Beauty.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, one of my absolute favorite movies because it portrayed the raw side of humanity, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's how I feel Alibi is going to portray this particular world to people. It's going to evoke, bless you. It's going to invoke a lot of emotions that people probably aren't ready to experience, but I think that's why people are either going to love it or hate it.
Well, and I think it is still to the point to where something like that is almost taboo still. And it really shouldn't be. I mean, honestly, we've all, like I said, lady on the street, freak in the sheet. It's something that's been going on for years and years and years. And it's something that we, if you get into it, you really enjoy it. It's something you have a lot of fun with. Before we talk about any more about Alibi, though, I do want to kind of let everybody know who you guys are. Jasmine got into film mainly as a fight choreographer and a stunt actor, but turned into a producer actor when she realized how kick-ass she was at what she was doing. And then Carlos is a self-taught filmmaker. Everything he knows, he learned from troubleshooting, researching, and his strong desire just to learn how things work. And also, you can check out his short film, Widow, right down here in the description. I do have that. What was that like, filming Widow? Like, was that your first real, short film that you produced together for the world, or?
Well, Widow came to be, it was basically just a weekend, just trying to figure out, something to do with a new camera that I purchased. So at that time I was like, okay, well, what can we do here at my house, right? And we just kind of started shooting, putting things together. The challenge that I wanted to do was make a short film that had absolutely zero dialogue, but it was still engaging. It was still beautifully shot, and it still told the story without having a single word spoken. It's all about being able to translate the emotion that our character is dealing with into the audience, and then not actually saying what happens and leaving it up with the only clue that there is, which is widow.
Right.
So it's there's many variations that word can be used in, right? So that's kind of like where we went with it. I didn't aim to entertain a general audience. I wanted to entertain my own peers, people that were in the industry as well. I wanted them to ask me, how did you do that? And that's exactly what it did. And it opened up a lot of doors because of that, because it showed that I can actually direct an entire project without a single word spoken.
Right.
So that's where a director can really shine, is where he can utilize nothing but subtext. That's the stuff that's not written into the script, right? It's the stuff that with the mannerisms, the expression, the subtleness, the certain way the mouth shifts when it's, you know, expressing things, right? Just these little subtle things that really sell it, right? So, you know, that's what we ended up, you know, doing, putting it out, and everybody seemed to really like it. I didn't push it or anything either. I just kind of like put it out and just let it do its thing and see how it flowed on its own.
Right. And you guys, now I'm going to push it. You guys can check that out once more. The link's right down here in the description. So make sure you're checking that out. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think about Widow. I know these guys would love to hear it, and I would love to hear what you guys think about it. So we know what you guys are doing right now with Alibi. You got that coming up. Now, I want to go back to the past, though, for a little bit. And I want to talk about how horror started for you guys, the first horror movies you watched. Let's start with you first this time, Carlos. Your first horror movie was?
From what I can recall, the first horror movie that I saw that, you know, still leaves an impact was It, with Tim Curry.
Yeah.
As a child, it was just a terrifying film. I didn't understand what was going on because it's a clown, but then, you know, little did I really, at the time I couldn't comprehend that it was an alien, that, you know, like,
right.
That's the part of the film I still don't remember. And when I watched the new version, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. That's what happens with him. I just thought he was a killer clown at first. But what really pushed me into actually watching horror films, and it's funny, it wasn't even a film at all. It was actually this rock legend named Alice Cooper. And there was a song that my uncle had played when I was probably about 3 or 4 years old, and I would keep playing it over and over again, and that was Steven. Little did I know how much that song, you know, connected with me. I just knew I liked it a lot. I didn't know what it was about, but the melody and just the way the characters were coming to life. And then later on, I discovered it's a 3-part story, right? You know, you had the song before it, you Steven, and then the one after where, you know, he actually kills his wife, you know, and it's all based off of what his mother's telling him. Knowing that, I started getting attached to Friday the 13th series because, again, a mother that's talking to her child to kill people. But the first film was what really grabbed me in that series, and which is why I liked it, because I'm just like, we follow a protagonist and an antagonist, or should I say, yeah, an antagonist that eventually, you know, dies because she's, you know, defending her son, and in that the son returns to avenge his mother, and so she's stuck in his head, and then we have a whole series of that following that character. That's
and
what
funny
I love
enough, he Alice Cooper ended up doing a bunch of music for Friday the 13th, and I believe it was either Jason Lives or the one before it. You know, Alice Cooper had a little role in it, and then he ended up doing a lot of the music for that movie. So I just think it's really funny that those two are connected with you, and they actually had that connection later on in the franchise. It's funny how that works sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny that, you know, you bring that up, because the way Alibi became, you know, how it got cast, how Widow got cast, was basically everybody was already, you know, that part of that character already. You know, it's just like everything just kind of worked on its own. I don't know how I managed to find people that are what I need, and so it fills a role, and then it's so natural. It makes my job a lot easier as far as direction go. I can work more on the technical aspects. We're trying to make, you know, this film for, you know, a handful of dollars and make it look really, really big. And when we release the trailer, you'll see that, you know, a lot of talent went into it, and very minimal amount of money it cost to produce it, right? We are shooting, you know, we did went out and purchase like state-of-the-art film equipment, but, you know, to shoot this project and many, many, many other projects, which is also what we'll shoot with on the House that Eats Flesh.
Yeah.
We shoot with this equipment too, the Red Cinema cameras. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
I'm very, very excited for the House That Eats Flesh, though, as well. I was lucky enough to have Lydia on. And obviously, you guys will be working with Lisa Wilcox on the House That Eats Flesh. That is super dope. So I'm very excited about that as well. Something that's funny that also, you said your first horror movie was It, and you didn't realize at that point in your life that it was an alien. You know, it's something that came to you later on in life. And I think that's a funny transition over into Jasmine's first horror movie, talking about aliens, and your first horror movie was
Aliens.
That's a horror movie for you?
Yes.
That's like a horror action.
Well,
It's really Scott. I mean, it's gorgeous.
It's suiting. It's suiting for me. The horror action elements.
And I believe that Alien is just a straight horror movie. I think the Aliens is a horror with, you know, a splash of action, and then
Yes.
Alien 3 is just like a straight action film. But
Yeah.
to me, if you're stuck in space with these aliens, I mean, you got this fucking thing coming at you. You could have that take place at a grocery store, and I'm shitting my pants. This thing is horror to me through and through and through. So I do gotta agree. If you got a xenomorph, I'm shitting myself. So totally in with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't the first movie that was absolutely, I don't know. There's other movies I could think of that are much more, you know, horrifying, gruesome, whatnot. But Alien, it was the first movie that I remember having a strong impact on me when I really started to care about cinema. And it was mainly because of the lead character, Sigourney Weaver. It was the first time that I had seen a lead female not only portray her weaknesses, but also go in and just kick ass in a kind of real, like for that situation in a realistic way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was used to watching movies like, you know, where the guy comes in and saves the woman and saves her from a bad situation and she's helpless without the man. And then when I saw Aliens, I'm like, women can do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, we can do that. I'm like...
And it's funny because horror, this is something I've talked about on the podcast quite often. Horror has always been ahead of its time when it comes to social matters, whether it be women coming out and kicking ass. You know, horror really started portraying women as the lead, as the dominant one in a film. When it comes to race, when it comes to LGBTQ matters in general, when it comes to all that, you know, horror has always been ahead of its time with trans, with mental illness, with psycho. These things that horror has always been on the forefront of and continued to evolve and become a big part of is a reason that I'm really big into horror, the social commentary that goes along with the jumps and the scares. So with this first question, I'm going to stick with you this time. We're talking about Aliens. Do you remember how old you were the first time you watched it?
Oh gosh. I must have been probably about 8 or 9. So not too terribly young, but I also grew up in a pretty strict, like, Christian household. So that kind of stuff wasn't really introduced to any of my siblings until later on when my parents were just like, oh, we've raised too many kids, we don't care anymore. And then I'm the baby of 5, so they gave up trying to instill their morals, you know, at a certain point, and I got to have, you know, all the fun. But yeah, about 8 or 9 years old, and I was just so captivated by the alien, the animatronics, the practical effects. You know, it's one of the reasons I absolutely love, you know, like 80s, 90s horror movies, because it's all practical.
And practical effects are the way to go. I've always said that. But at the same time, if you can splash a little CGI in there and make it work, that's awesome. I'm not totally against CGI, but I am with you. I think practical is 100% the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I love combining practical, it's basically special effects with visual effects, and utilizing the composition field as well. So not only are you using CGI, but you're using actual footage of like actual blood, or, you know, the fake blood exploding, right? You don't, because that digitized blood doesn't have the right physics. They just can't nail it at all, because the flow of blood is different as where when they create the fake blood on film digitally, it just flows like more like a river. You know what I mean? And if you watch any type of like videos of like Traces of Death or Faces of Death or any of that stuff, you can kind of see how the blood actually moves and how it goes. And one of the things that I found that sells the blood effects for me, and it moves and it reacts just like real blood, is just pure red food coloring, just direct, no corn syrup, because blood isn't transparent. It is very solid because it contains a lot of iron. Well, that red food coloring also contains a little bit of iron in it. So when it bleeds, it actually spreads up and around instead of down, because the corn syrup brings it down on the effect. And so when we put the blood in a tube and it leaks, it spreads upwards as well, just like real blood does as well.
Sure. That's awesome. It's fun that you get to hone your craft and learn these things for yourself that you think is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks most, like, to me, it looks most phenomenal. It actually leaves a gut-wrenching feeling if you pull it off with the appropriate prosthetics that are used in the film. So if you have the right cut on the skin using like more like the ballistics gel mixed in with silicone, you can get a really sharp look, and then it's pretty good. It's just, you know, as long as you're not sweating, because that
Sure.
shit. But it looks pretty gnarly, and you can punch hair into the silicone, and you can make your wound look pretty realistic after that. You know, it's
That's
that
awesome.
attention to detail. It's important, and so trying to find the right blood formula has been an issue, but utilizing blood with or red food coloring with corn syrup and other types of things that you could put in it to darken it and thicken it up or thin it out. It's good for the mouth stuff and things like that.
Like when we were shooting a short horror film and we needed to make blood on the spot, and he grabbed like coffee grounds and fake blood and food coloring, and the coffee grounds made the blood foam a little bit, and I had to put it in my mouth. So when I spat it out, it looked kind of coagulated, and it's just so gnarly. I'm like, this tastes like garbage, but it looks cool.
And so, you know, like I used to do hunting and stuff like that. So when you cut the animal, and it bleeds, right? The blood pouring into wherever it's at, it does foam up. It does foam, you know, when it's being poured. And that's the thing. Like a lot of people like to have the slow effect of blood when it goes. Blood pours, and it pours at a very interesting consistency rate, I guess you can say, right? That like the way it comes out. There's a certain thing to it because some parts have already started clotting. And then you have, you know, the things that go in there to break those clots off, and it thins out those parts. So your blood kind of flows a certain way. And for me, that's a very important detail, especially with some of the stuff that I want to do as far as, like, for example, in Alibi, we have a completely disturbing dismemberment scene where our character is dismembering somebody as they're bleeding out, and they're cutting them up into pieces and trying to get rid of the body. So it's pretty intense. But in order to do that, we have to create layers and layers and layers, and also utilize certain type of tubing that can be flattened. So when we cut into the skin, it actually bleeds naturally. Now, I did a music video for an artist named Twisted Insane. He had a couple other artists like Brother Lynch Hung and Tech Nine, which are known for horrorcore hip hop, right?
Yeah.
We did a scene where I was playing the butcher, and I had the leg, and I'm cutting into a leg, and it has to start bleeding as I'm cutting into the leg as the person's sedated, but they can still feel the pain, right? And I'm eating pieces of meat of who knows what. So it's a pretty gnarly looking scene, and that's the part that I love watching the reaction videos that the YouTubers do, because they're giving me exactly what I want. You know, the reaction of just like, oh, this is disgusting, and I love that. That's my favorite part. It's just one of my most satisfying moments is the scene.
That's what you're going for. So when someone's giving you exactly what you wanted, it's even better. And your background in hunting really does help, because you watch these things happen in real life, so you know how to better duplicate these things out there.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's what we did, though. You know, like utilizing we had silicone mixed with also layers of latex and foam. And the foam was done a certain density, so that way it would react like bone. So when I cut into it, it wasn't easy for the knife to cut into the bone. And so, of course, if you cut through the shin area, it looks more realistic than trying to cut through a calf.
Right.
The problem with cutting through fat is that it gets onto the blade. And so you have to use a certain oil on your blade to keep the fat from separating and binding. So you have oil, you have different soaps, right, that connect to fat or repel fat. And so you have to coat your blade in that, so that way you can cut through fat.
Right. See, and I don't hunt. I'm the biggest wuss in the world. Like if I hit a bird, I'm like, no, I'm going to hell. So like, that's me. But back to you, Carlos, with It. We talk about It, and the 1990 miniseries is so influential, even still to this day. It's aged well. It still gets talked about very often. In this film, what would you say the scene that affected you the most was?
The scene with the bathroom scene with the blood. That
with Beverly
scene,
with the balloon?
And the new one, it wasn't terrifying. It wasn't like, it was just too pretty to be, the film was too pretty to be scary. And it was more action than anything to me. The flow of it, the way it goes. But in the original, because of the limitations of filming back then, we were more like feeling like we were watching something we shouldn't be watching. And that was more terrifying. The fly on the wall feel. So that's something I always bit my style off of, you know, was just to kind of give more of that grungy, dark feel to things. And so that scene just got me, because it was just, it was, to me, even the blood that they used in that scene was like pretty gnarly. So.
And it's coming up through the sink, and you got a little girl screaming. And then her dad coming in like, what's wrong? I don't see anything, which makes it that much scarier, you know?
Yeah.
So Jasmine, let me bounce back over to you. What do you think? I just asked Carlos what scene affected him the most from It. But when it comes to Aliens, what is your favorite scene from Aliens?
Okay, well, favorite scene is when she gets into the exoskeleton suit, and it's that iconic
Get away from her, you bitch!
But with respect to horror, another scene that really got me is when the alien shanks Bishop and lifts him up into the air, and he's just spewing like his animatronic like white blood, and then he gets torn apart. And I remember watching that, and what really got me the most was the sound effects of him like gurgling the blood and the blade going in through his abdomen, because I paid such close attention to that, the audio more so than the visual, and that's what really like made it gut-wrenching for me.
And it's funny that you say that.
Well, that's the thing, because like you're talking, that guy is an animatronic, and it's still, you have that fear and that, like, what?
Yes. And even down to him just like gurgling on the blood while he's trying to scream as it's coming out, and he's being lifted into the air. Just that noise, I can hear it in my head right now. I haven't seen that movie in so long, but I can hear it.
Yeah. So, and it's such an amazing movie. I mean, it's in the discussion, as always, is what are the best sequels of all time? And you always get The Empire Strikes Back, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which wins in my opinion, and then Aliens is another one that's always up there. My two favorite sequels of all time, funny enough, are Terminator 2 Judgment Day and Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. I think that movie's fucking amazing. The Sticky Bandits are way better than the Wet Bandits. But Carlos, I'm going to bounce back to you real quick. When we all float down here, what would you say your favorite kill from It was?
Ooh, let's see. That's gonna be a hard one, because the kills weren't really what got me in the film. It was just the way Tim Curry's performance was, because he sounded like somebody I was familiar with, and he sounds like everybody's uncle, right? So it's kind of like that whole generalized, like I guess you could say
It's someone someone that could be close to you.
Yeah, it's just like
and it's funny you say that, because I've always said that Tim Curry's portrayal of It the Clown, look, I'm not saying anything bad about Bill Skarsgård, because I think he did great in the new It movies. I think that his ability to move his eyes the way, because that's all practical, none of that was CGI, that's all the way that was just him as a person doing that shit with his eyes and stuff. And I thought that was brilliant. And the way he talks, but with Tim Curry, the way that the clown looks, he's approachable. If I seen the Tim Curry It clown, I would approach him as a kid and be like, "Hey, what's up, dude?" But the Bill Skarsgård It, I would have shit my pants and ran away. He just looks terrifying. But the Tim Curry one looks like a party clown, and I think that's what makes him scarier to me, because there's a better chance of me approaching him and him biting into my face.
Yeah, it was a lot to do with his subtext as the character. He had these small mannerisms that he did that made him different, even though at face value he was very human and something we could identify. But then you sit with that person long enough. Let's just say you meet him at a party, and then you guys go out into the back to share a smoke or something, and then at that moment you realize there's something off about this person.
Oh.
That's what it's like. And then you realize you're alone with this person in the middle of the woods. Something's off. I'm in danger. That's the feel he gives you with his subtext performance. And that's why it's a phenomenal performance. Right. And even though he utilized that voice that was very, like 1,000 packs into Sunday, smoking voice, it was the subtext that was ultimately what was terrifying.
And he had the ability to be funny too. Like when he's in the library and he's like, "Well, you better catch it before it runs away." Like he makes you laugh when you see these scenes. Like, right. And that's what I love about the miniseries.
Yeah, because of his theater background, he has that physical presence, and that's an important part. He was able to dial it down for the film, and And because of that, you know, he brought a extremely memorable performance.
Yeah.
The thing with the new it was just too forced to be dark. As where, you know, Tim Curry's version is kind of like he's all over the place like a real psychopath, yet he's still collected. And so it's kind of like he's aware of it like a sociopath as well. So it's kind of like he has all these psychological attributes that are like red flags, and you should stay away from this person because he's not only hazard to himself but to everybody around him. And he should probably be condemned or, you know, institutionalized at least. Right. But he's not, because he can, you know, like Norman Bates, just sit there and not to hurt a fly, so that way, you know.
It's funny because Stephen King wrote it based around John Wayne Gacy, as we all know.
Right.
And
yeah.
That's exactly what you're describing, is the way that he was. You know, we talked earlier about Lady on the Streets, Freak in the Sheets. That was John Wayne Gacy. It was Gentleman in the Streets, boy rapist in the sheets. So I mean, like, it's just like way different, and the way they portrayed him with Tim Curry is much more relatable than Bill Skarsgård. But see, I didn't hate the new It, and I think It Chapter 2 was phenomenal. I know a lot of people dislike it, but I think the acting, Bill Hader alone was brilliant in that movie.
He carried the film
100%. That movie showed me that he was not just a comedic actor; he's a fucking actor, and I absolutely loved his performance in that movie.
Yeah, the fact that he was so like, I don't want to do this, but as he's walking towards it was my favorite thing. That subtext was amazing, because most actors, when I've like worked with, you know, them coming off the tops, they won't actually start walking towards what they need to walk towards, because it's described in the script, right? And then they'll do it when it's said in the script, but he starts it before then. So if you read the script and you watch the film, you can see that his subtext was already predetermined. So he's already committed to doing that, but he's going to bitch like a crazy man. You know, he's going to bitch about it and let us feel human. Like, that's how we connected with him, because we're like, fuck, I don't want to do this shit. As you're walking there with a bat that has nails on it to beat the shit out of what you can beat the shit out of. But you're saying it to yourself, you don't want to do it, but it has to be done either way. Right. It doesn't mean you're not going to do it and be successful at it. It's just, you know, you want to voice your opinion, and everybody has that right, you know? And so we 100%. Connect with Bill Hader character that way, you know? So that's why, for me, like, he carried the second film along. Everybody else was like just there for me as fillers. There was nothing memorable about anybody in that second part of the film other than Bill Hader's character and the way he portrayed him.
Knocked it out of the park, man.
Yeah.
So this next question is for both of you. I'm going to let Jasmine go first this time, but this one's for both of you. We talked about your first horror movie, Jasmine being Aliens, Carlos being It. Now, what I want to do here is I want to go scream on you guys for a second. What's your favorite scary movie? Jasmine, what is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Favorite horror movie of all time. Okay, probably Saw 2. Not the first one, but the second one.
Very good. Nice.
Yes, the sequel was fantastic for me just because the story was so captivating. It was almost like a game of Clue. You're trying to figure out who done it and what's going on the entire time while these just absolutely terrifying, you know, situations are taking place. And I'm a very empathetic kind of person. So as these things are happening to, you know, the victims, I picture myself in their situation, and I just have extreme anxiety throughout the whole movie. And that's what makes it terrifying for me.
And it's funny because a little behind the scenes, I had Frankie G on an episode recently who played the bigger guy in the movie with the baseball bat. And there's a scene in the movie where he throws Amanda down into the needles.
Oh my God.
They said he told me after he had done that, she told him she was 5 months pregnant. And he's like, what are you doing? Why would you not tell me? She's like, because if I would have told you, Frankie, you would have gently lowered me down. And he's like, well, you're damn right I would have. I wouldn't have thrown you down like that.
It was
just one of the craziest stories I've ever heard in my life. And if you get the chance to talk to Frankie G, take that opportunity. He's one of the sweetest men I've ever met in my life, which is funny because he's big. I think of him as Xavier from Saw 2. And I'm like, oh my God, but being able to talk with that guy, one of the sweetest guys I've ever met in my life, such a kind, genuine guy. And it's good to know his performance in Saw 2 helped to make that one of your favorite horror movies of all time. That's really, really cool.
That's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up too, because that scene in particular, the emotion that the character Amanda expressed, I remember that so vividly because she starts out terrified, frozen, and she slowly builds up to just pure rage where she's shoving the needles around in the pit to find the keys. And then she comes out, she's like, I got the fucking keys. I'm like, I remember thinking that was so badass. I'm like, that's probably something that happened to me. I'd be terrified, but when push comes to shove, I'm just like, you know, fuck this. We got to go.
Especially, beating an addiction. I always think of Nightmare 3, the Dream Warriors, when you got the girl that beat that heroin addiction, and then Freddy kills her with the needles, like in one of the most heartbreaking scenes ever in cinema history. But let's bounce back to you, Carlos. Your favorite horror movie. And what I do love is when I send people the questions that I ask, I never send this question because I always want an on your toes answer. So what would your favorite horror movie be?
My favorite is The Witch.
Witch, like the VV, the newer one that just came out.
Yeah,
such a good movie, man. Such an underrated horror movie, but oh my god,
masterfully directed.
Oh, it's beautifully. See, everybody always argues The Witch or The Lighthouse. I don't think that's even a conversation, man, because I wasn't a huge fan of The Lighthouse, but The Witch is amazing from beginning to end with every single character hitting the right amount of development. There's not too much. There's not too little. It's perfect movie. What a great, I've never had anybody mention that on the podcast. I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm such a huge fan of that movie.
Yeah, that movie was done extremely well. The way he directed it, the way he told the story, and he was, he didn't have the biggest budget either. He had enough to create that little village that they lived in and whatnot. But it was the fact that he casted the right people for it,
right?
And he was able to do it like that. So, what I loved about it was that it was actually very, 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 very accurate to a witch's tale, right? I think the history of witches and whatnot. I read a book many, many years ago called "The Hammer of the Witches," which is was presented to the Catholic Church to hunt witches. Basically, this guy wanted to. He said he found a way to be able to identify a witch and then to be able to hunt them down and burn them. Right during that era that we're burning witches. So that book was written there. It's written very much just like the Bible's laid out, in the little article and formats for that. So you can just go to page this, number this, and then you know what scripture you're reading. So it does that. And what that book did was it described what a lot of what the Bible misses, right? So I'm not a religious person. I just do a lot of studies because I want to understand. I'm more of a psychological person. I studied psychology for many years. So I was interested in understanding people and how and why they gravitate towards certain things and understanding that psychology, and then also understanding if the individual has chemical imbalances, the stresses that the individual has. And so that all determines on what someone ultimately then would believe in and what they find true and how long they will stay to that. So I can do predictions on that. That's why when I watch horror films, it's more of a character study than it is about the kills in any film in general. I like watching a film that actually has a solid character backstory and leaves clues throughout the film to tell the story, right? So that's why I love The Witch very much, because there's tons of little things here and there that is going to tell you where it's going to go and what it is. And the thing is, they're not dumbing their audience down in any way, shape, or form. The ritual performs, it's done. And if you're aware, if you have knowledge on that ritual, then you understand, like what she was doing with babies, for example, right? To stay youthful and stuff like that. So after watching The Witch, I was inspired to write my own short film called Hair, which is based off of the English folktale of witches, which is where they embodied very large rabbits that used to go around drinking the milk of the cows. And then they would come into mature and become actual witches in human form. But that all goes back to the succubus, incubuses, what the demons are, what the devil is, all that, and how the Oma can actually come to be, but why it's difficult for it to actually be what it is. Things like that. That book breaks that down and challenges everything that the Bible says. So what's missing, all the questions that you don't have answered, and you're just forced to say, well, you just have to believe. Well, this book answers all that other stuff. Then you can weigh your options and go from there.
Right.
So that's why, when I was watching The Witch, I was just like, this guy did his homework to tales of tales of tales before tales to write the story called The Witch. and bring it to what we watched and identify it. And what was the most brilliant part of the film was that we don't ever see the man he hired to portray the main antagonist, right? The man that was talking to her, the goat becomes in its real form. And so all you see are just his type of clothing that he's wearing. And if you understand the era of that clothing, then you know who he is. You know what I mean? And so that was the brilliance of that, because you don't get to see him, even though he looks exactly how he should be. Those individuals, he's very Spaniard looking, right? Long hair, blue eyes, the dark beard that also has red highlights in it. And, the blue eyes that have the darkness into it. I think he's dressed, in that, I guess you could say the Musketeer era style clothing, right? Which is before the film where it took place, many, many years. And so that, when I saw that scene, I was just like, this guy has spent years developing this film and finally got it to make it happen, however binding was necessary. And it was phenomenal. I'm
glad he did.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was something we haven't seen. Rob Zombie attempted to do it with Lords of Salem, but he was more shock value with not necessarily seeing the demon himself at full capacity, but the birth of the child that looks like Groot.
Right.
So it's just like, then she's depicted as Mary at the end. It's just kind of like shock value. So that film was also cool because they utilized its frequency to distill this fear of like uncertainty or discomfort, kind of like what Marilyn Manson used to do with the Resident Evil soundtrack, how he would do that. But because he was working with somebody else, it kind of like clashed, and so it didn't really translate the way he wanted it to translate. So Rob Zombie did that with Lords of Salem and tied it into the actual plot of the story, where the record is the one that's casting the spell, right? So for me, I'm just like, this is just a masterful piece of work. There hasn't been a movie that scared me since pretty much It. And so watching, I think I was like 5. Like, well, it's because like the way I grew up, it was like, like we dealt with real life situations, real life problems, and real life like scenarios that were just tough. And so like there's very little that could scare me after those experiences.
Right.
Being shot at, experiencing near death things like that. That stuff, like knowing what that feels like, knowing what it is, it's kind of like you get rid of the fear of any fear, because like when your time comes, it's like that. That's it. You don't know. It's over. That's it.
Right.
So knowing it like that quick, I was just like, well, that eliminated a lot of like any type of fear I would have when I was growing up. So The Witch, though, because I didn't fully comprehend the other side of the Bible, The Witch was able to bring out a certain type of like fear, uncomfortableness when I was watching it, because I'm just like, I knew what was going to happen with her in the end. That was the most predictable part, but how it was going to come to be and to the severity of her psychosis was also at play.
Sure.
And
so that's a movie that is so much deeper. Like you said, it's so much deeper than surface value.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that movie has so many layers. You have to watch it multiple times to realize what the director is doing with it. Right. And once you realize what he's doing with that, you have so much more appreciation, because people, when they watch films, they watch it at face value. And if there's something about it that intrigued them, they'll go back and watch it again, and then they'll catch it the second time, and then they will love it.
Yeah.
The other people are just either okay with it, or they absolutely hated it, or they never even finished it because it was too slow. And so it's kind of like, it's like you have to pay attention to what's going on in the film, to what's going on with the characters. Scenarios in the background, even those kind of little things, just like in Shutter Island, right? With the continuity issues, right? That's what when the film industry would call it, continuity issues, but it was actually intentional. Yeah. So here she is, she's talking to the person having a drink, and then it goes back to him, and then he talks back to her, and she's talking, and she's having another drink, but all of a sudden, it's like that. Then next thing you know, she's having another drink, and it's like this. It's like, wait, did she have 3 different cups? Right. Did she have 3 different items that she was using? What happened to the background? What happened to that picture? Why does the background look different? Why does the furniture change? Why did the furniture change color? Why is the design a little different? You'll notice the little things. And so if you catch that, I was paying attention to that stuff in the beginning of the film, and I was just like, there's a lot of inconsistencies. None of this is real. And I knew that within like the first 30 minutes of the film. And I was just there for the ride after that, because I just wanted to feel what he was feeling and know what was going to happen in the end, as far as him coming to terms with his reality.
Right.
You know, realizing
And
that
that's a movie that doesn't get talked about enough either. Is Shutter Island. Leo gave a hell of a performance in that movie. And I just love at the end when he's like, would you rather be a psycho killer or would you rather have a lobotomy and forget everything? You know, it's just like, damn, he knew. Like he knew this whole time. He just fucking fucked with him the whole time, man.
Yep.
So we always go back to end the podcast. I always end with the same question. We're going to go back to your guys' first horror movies. This time, Carlos, I'm going to start with you. Still with It. We're ranking this on a skull count, 0 to 5 skulls. Now, we're not being critics. We're not ranking it on production. We're not ranking it on score, on acting, nothing like that. Just strictly what this movie means to you and how much it affected you. So with It, 0 to 5 skulls, what would your ranking be?
I would rank it 4 out of 5 skulls.
That's a perfect ranking. Jasmine, with Aliens, what about you? Same thing, not critics, just what this movie means to you and how it affected you. 0 to 5 skulls. What would your ranking be?
I would give it about a 4 as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a fair ranking. Like I said, our first horror movie is just like our first time doing drugs. You do it, you get that high, and then you're always chasing that dragon again with every horror movie you watch. So whether it was a good high or a bad high, either way, you'll always remember it. So don't go anywhere, guys. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, like I said at the beginning, make sure you're clicking these links down here in the description. Follow them on social media. Check out Widow. It's all right down here. And soon enough, we're going to have a link for the Alibi Indiegogo. So make sure you're checking back and checking with their social media so you can become a part of that. As always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.